So when we look at one other disease we're going to look at with cats, and I bring this up for a reason, and it has to do with nutrition and things like that. It's called hepatic lipidosis, or basically fatty liver disease. It's a life-threatening condition that is very, very, very difficult to pull cats out of once they get into it. I'm lucky, usually, if I can save only 10% of these cats, and that's about the national average. It is caused by starvation, and I'll explain what I mean by that in a second. And I'll explain why it's very, very important when we talk about nutrition in animals when we get to the end of it. So here's what happens in a hepatic lipidosis cat. The cat stops eating. Everybody knows that cats are incredibly finicky eaters to begin with. So all of a sudden, for some reason, they don't want to eat. Either they're sick, or and then usually it's an illness that starts it, or all of a sudden they just don't like the food that's being put down. Or the other thing that sometimes triggers it is people that go away for a week and they have somebody that just comes in to check on their cat every now and then. That stress alone of the owner being gone can sometimes make a cat not want to eat, and then all of a sudden the owner comes back and the cat's yellow and they don't know why. It's because the cat hasn't been eating for the week. But what happens then is your body goes into, anybody's body goes into what we call a negative energy balance. And that's a fancy way pretty much of saying that the body is not taking in enough calories to meet its daily requirements. So where is it going to get those calories from? It's going to start burning its own fat. For some reason, Mother Nature screwed up when she made the cat, and these fats that are broken down are converted into what we call FFAs, or free fatty acids. The cat's liver cannot process its own free fatty acids well. Nobody quite understands why, but the liver just can't do it. So it causes these areas, instead of those being broken down further, these fatty acids just deposit themselves on the liver and cause these kind of like fat spots and things like that. And basically, when you get these fatty spots, as I'll show in a picture in a second, the liver starts to fail. It can't produce its normal functions. You get this backup of processes, and the bilirubin, which is a yellowish pigment or an orangey pigment, and that's why cats' gums and people's, they say like if you have liver disease or something like that, your iris will, your sclera will start to get yellow, your gums may get yellow, your skin starts to look yellow. That's because of the buildup of this pigment. What happens, unfortunately, in these cases, is the cats now start feeling worse. So they start vomiting. They don't want to eat, and because they're not eating, then their body starts to try to break down more fat, and it becomes this downward spiral where you have to get the cat into what we call a positive energy balance, and get food into them as best as you can, so that this breakdown of free fatty acids stops occurring, and the cat starts using energy that's coming in instead of its own energy stores. And to treat these guys, we usually have to do very, very aggressive supportive care. So we have to restore what we call, again, the positive energy balance, which basically means you guys have learned a little bit about what we call MERs and RERs and the formulas for doing that, the mean energy requirements, resting energy requirements. That's what we do in these cases. We calculate, based on the animal's weight, how many calories it needs to sustain normal function. And we will feed it that amount of calories, usually through a feeding tube or force feeding, unless all of a sudden they want to pick up again and start eating on their own. But as I said, you're successful in only about 10 to 15% of these cases. And so that can be a little bit difficult for a lot of vets to deal with. It's a very labor-intensive process. It's very intensive on the owner, so we really try to prevent this condition from happening if we can. So this is an example of what happens to a liver in hepatic lipidosis. This over here is a normal liver. All of these are hepatocytes, liver cells. They're all nice and healthy. They're all doing their function. On this side, all of these little clear windows that you can see here, these are all fat deposits in the liver itself. So as you can see, there's almost no liver cells there to do any of their normal jobs. This is why the liver fails. Remember, the liver is an organ that's responsible for filtering a lot of your blood, for making sure you're taking out toxins, things like that, and also aiding in some digestion. So if it can't do its job, all other parts of the body suffer. And you can see there's only maybe a small little section of good cells up there. So that's basically what happens. This is an example of what a liver of a cat that's suffering from fatty liver disease looks like. Normally a liver, and this shows up a lot better on my screen than it does on this one. Normally a liver is going to look like a nice reddish color, maybe dark red, things like that. all of these little whiter spots and yellower spots, that's all fat deposits through the entire liver. So sometimes there's just nothing you can do at that stage, except hope. But if you are going to do a feeding tube, this is what's involved. You actually insert a tube directly into the stomach or the esophagus of the cat, usually through the skin, and you're actually, this is a very high calorie dense food that we are going to then force, basically syringe feed into the cat's stomach via either tube. Cats usually tolerate this pretty well. You know, there are certain precautions you have to take. Sometimes you can get a little bit of an infection at what we call the stoma site, where the tube actually goes in. But this works very, very well for cats. You can do it. I mean, you can do a feeding tube for any animal, pretty much. And it's not just the condition we do it in. Like if the animal's got a fractured jaw or a tumor or something like that, we'll do those too, just to give their mouth a rest. Usually, what happens, just to piss off veterinarians, is as soon as you put this tube in, the cat starts eating the next day. And you know that we have to kind of deal with that. But the tubes are designed, which is also nice. Even the ones that go into the esophagus, the animal still can't eat. So if they want to eat on their own, the food's just going to go around the tube and back down to the stomach. So it's not something that's going to include the esophagus in any way or that. So that's basically what we do in fatty liver disease. And usually they'll have to be fed 2 or 3 times a day. We start small and then work our way back up to what their mean energy requirements are going to be for the day.
When you take the tube out, is there going to be a hole there, or do you sew it?
There is. Usually what happens if it's a case of if it's one that's in the esophagus, and when we go into the esophagus, we actually go through the side of the neck. I'll try to find a video to show that, and I can send this quick for you guys. Usually what we do is we just pull that out, and we'll just keep the site covered, and the skin will everything will seal over in a day or two. With the stomach one, sometimes you do have to put a little bit of a suture in there, but usually what will happen is you keep that stomach tube in for a good 2 weeks. You actually get a sealing of the stomach wall to the body wall. So you will have a hole there, but what happens is that hole just kind of closes over and the stomach just remains sealed to the body wall. So there's, you can't, if it's a stomach tube, you have to leave a stomach tube in for 14 days. Even if they start eating, you have to leave that tube in to allow that sealing to happen. If it doesn't, then you do run the risk of, if you pull that tube out quick, or the cat does, the stomach hole staying open long enough for some stomach contents to leak into the abdomen, and then that can cause like a really bad, what we call peritonitis, inflammation, infection type of thing.